All right, welcome to this review for Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. This book is, I guess it was published in the early 90s. Okay, so talk about it real quick. I will read the back cover of the book. By the way, I hate this cover art. The original cover design for these books was great. This is so generic. But this is the beginning of the Mars trilogy. So it says here, reading the back cover, discovered the novel that launched one of science fiction's most beloved, acclaimed, and awarded trilogies, Kim Stanley Robinson's masterly near future chronicle of interplanetary colonization. For centuries, the barren, desolate landscape of the Red Planet has beckoned to humankind. Now, a group of 100 colonists begin a mission whose ultimate goal is to transform Mars into a more Earth like planet. They will place giant satellite mirrors in the Martian orbit to reflect light to the surface. Black dust sprinkled on the polar caps will capture warmth and melt the ice. And massive tunnels drilled into the mantle will create stupendous vents of hot gases. But despite these ambitious goals, there are some who would fight to the death to prevent Mars from ever being changed. All right, so there's your summary. This is endorsed by Arthur C. Clarke. Arthur C. Clarke says, a staggering book, the best novel on the colonization of Mars that has ever been written. And that's kind of who I'm going to compare Kim Stanley Robinson to, is Arthur C. Clarke. So I think it was about this time last year I read this book by Arthur C. Clarke here, which is The Songs of Distant Earth. Okay, this is Arthur C. Clarke, hard science fiction. And my big complaint with Arthur C. Clarke is the fact that he does not have conflict between characters in at least the stuff that I've read. Most of Arthur C. Clarke's fiction, science fiction, is very utopian, and you don't really see any conflict between characters. So I will say that I'm just going to call him Kim Stanley Robinson, let's say KSR, all right? So KSR here, he does have conflict. So I'm going to get into kind of just some of my quick notes. This is not a thin book by any stretch of the means, and I'll say this up front because maybe you're going to check out, you don't want to watch this full review, and that's fine. My opinion on the book, is it a yes or a no? I'm kind of undecided at this point, okay? And let me tell you why. The book does not resolve really with a satisfying conclusion. When you get to like the last 100 pages or so, like everything in this book just goes crazy. And as I was winding down, I was saying to myself, there's only like 50 pages left. How is he going to wrap all this up? He doesn't, okay? So that's why there's 2 more books in this series. So I cannot really give you like a full recommendation on the book because it feels like an incomplete story. Because it's a trilogy. And I don't really feel like I can give you a was it worth it or not worth it until I finish all 3 books. So maybe you're going to check out now. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I have the other 2 books in this series, so I am going to read them. But I do want to talk about some of the setup for this book, the things that are interesting. So, read the back cover to you. This book was written in the early 90s, but it starts in the year 2026. So the ship, the Ares, which carries these people to Mars, is the second Mars expedition, manned Mars expedition. There was a first expedition with a man named John Boone, who was the first man on Mars. He goes on this second ship, all right? And the crew is comprised of 35 Americans, 35 Russian cosmonauts, and then 30 internationals, people based from other countries. Um, there are some major ones here that I'll get into, the ones that are listed that are really important to the narrative of what are called the first 100. All right. So the first 100, they arrive in September of 2027. So this is like a 9-month trip in the spaceship. And there is, from the USA, Frank Chalmers. He is the head of the American contingent. I don't like him. Okay, that's one of my issues with this book, is that a lot of the characters are unlikable. I don't think you're supposed to like Frank Chalmers, though. But he's the head. You've got John Boone on this mission. He is, again, the first man on Mars, and he has a rivalry between himself and Frank. There's a geologist team comprised of Phyllis Boyle, Anne Claiborne, and Simon Fraser. I will give slight spoilers here, and that Anne Claiborne and Simon Fraser do end up becoming a couple. They become romantically involved. So there are some relationships in this book. Some of them, I don't know, they got a little bit much. I like the science in the book quite a bit, but some of the characters not so much. We've got Spencer Jackson and Sax Russell. Those guys are friends. Sax Russell is really important because he is a physicist and he is the head of terraforming. That's wherein some of this conflict lies in, and that you have some of these scientists that want to basically preserve Mars as it is. Those are become later known as Reds. And then there's people that want to terraform Mars, and they become known as Greens. So there's the Red faction and the Green faction. So characters like Anne Claiborne and Simon Fraser are Reds, and then Sax Russell is a Green. So we have some Russian characters here that are kind of important, which I'm just going to name the big three that are probably the most important out of the ones that are listed, which are Maya Pointovna. She's the head of the cosmonaut division. And then you've got Nadia, I'm going to butcher this name, Chernyshevsky, and Arkady Bogdanov. These two are engineers. I guess Maya is an engineer as well. But Nadia's and Arkady, I think those two characters, Nadia and Arkady, are pretty interesting characters. Probably two of the more likable characters in the book, at least in my opinion. Maya, not so much. Then a couple of the international ones that are really important here are Hiroko, who is from Japan. She's a biotechnology expert. And then Michel Duval, who is a French psychiatrist. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Michel. He's an interesting character as well. Hiroko's interesting. I don't know. So you got a mix here, all right? And I will say one of the things about this book that is out of date, you know, KSR here did his research, but some of the things that we've discovered since the early 90s that would change this book if it was written now were the discovery of percolates. I think that's how you say it, perchlorates. These are chemical compounds that are in the Martian soil that are toxic to human beings, and they can actually like interfere with the function of your thyroid. Okay, so and they also result in strong oxidation, so they are detrimental to equipment and technology. So if there was going to be a Mars expedition now, NASA or whoever's in charge of this would have to find some kind of way to detoxify the soil, right? So the science in this book is a bit outdated. Okay, this is something that KSR did not know about back then. All right, but again, the pros on this book, like the science is really cool. It seems plausible. It feels believable. It feels real. It's really grounded. The spaceship Ares is really interesting. One of the things that happens in this book is the construction of a space elevator. All right, and Phyllis is kind of like the head of that later on. And the whole concept of building a elevator at the equator that reaches up into orbit that's tethered to an asteroid is really cool. Um, one of the things that happens in here is that John Boone, as he's traveling around the planet talking to various people, he has an AI companion, which is called Pauline. So this is really like, early 90s. He's predicting artificial intelligences, which are happening now. So there's like science fiction in this book that has become science reality. Again, I'll get back to I guess that there's a lot of politics involved in this, and I don't think I'm going to get too much into the politics in this review. Okay, but it's there. It's interesting, but it's kind of in the background, and I guess we'll have to let the story unfold in Green Mars and Blue Mars to see like what kind of society ends up getting built on Mars, because you definitely have like Mars independence versus colonization. You have technocrats that are trying to mine resources. There is transhumanism in this book with genetically modified organisms. There's quite a bit of interesting stuff in the novel, and KSR, he does a good job with it, but sometimes he can wander a bit. That's one of my criticisms of the novel, is that like especially towards the end of the novel, when it's like we're in the downward action, I just kind of wanted things to wrap up, because there's a lot of pages that are devoted to just driving around the Martian landscape and talking about Mars, what it looks like and the geology and everything, which is it's fine, but it's written in just such boring prose, like you're reading a scientific journal. He doesn't do anything to punch up the language. So um, I guess if you're not a fan of purple prose, you'll love this book because none of it's there. It's I'll just say this. He kind of suffers from the same problem as Arthur C. Clarke, and that while it's grounded so much in science, it really feels like it's coming from the logical brain, and that you can tell KSR's really skills as a writer are in that hard sci-fi element, and not so much as being like a great writer of language. um I may be biased in this category. I probably am. I do prefer like the writing style of, say, a Ray Bradbury, and or somebody along those lines, somebody that's got a real just beautiful use of language, and this is just like very workmanlike. Okay? There's a lot of really unlikable characters in this. I think that the religion in this book is done very poorly. That's probably my biggest criticism. There is approximately one character in this novel, Phyllis, okay, who identifies herself as a Christian, and she's a lousy Christian. I mean, she's probably the worst character in the novel, just from the standpoint of her ethics, which, yeah, there's a religious debate that takes place on board the Aries between John Boone and Phyllis. And John Boone is like an ex-Lutheran who doesn't believe in Christianity anymore, and he basically spews forth some like I don't know, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Richard Dawkins, or Bart Ehrman level critiques of Christianity, and Phyllis basically, they don't have a discussion about it or a debate about it really. She just has like a meltdown and just says, "You don't have faith. You don't have faith," which is such a low tier like rebuttal. Like, if this was a Dostoevsky novel, right? Like Fyodor Dostoevsky writing this, you would have like this attack or assault on Christianity, and then you would have somebody that would basically rebut it, maybe not even in words, but just through their lifestyle or something, kind of like in the Brothers Karamazov, where you have Ivan level this devastating argument against Christianity, and then you have like the life of Father Zosima in the next chapter, kind of as a counterpoint, and we don't get that here. So I don't know, and it's not just the Christianity that's done poorly either. There's a lot of Islamic characters that end up migrating to Earth, and you have this pervading presence of especially Sufi Islam, and it just feels very. It doesn't feel right. It feels off. Some of the ways that the Islamic religion is portrayed feels a little stereotyped. But this guy. I mean, that's not his focus. I don't think it's his focus. So we'll see what happens in the next book. So the verdict is out on the series for me. I have the next two books. It's not a bad book. I rather enjoyed the scientific aspects, and then once we do start getting conflict and drama happening, which happens really in the second half of the novel, I felt it really picked up. So the first half of the book was kind of slow going, and the second half is when all the interesting ideas, the conflicts, and interpersonal spats begin to really take shape, especially on the more geopolitical sphere, because Earth isn't doing so well in this book. It's suffering from overpopulation and conflict. And one of the other things that's interesting about this novel is that they're basically a television show. The crew is wiring. Well, I guess they're sending videotape, so they don't have like digital technology or something, I guess. But the crew of the Ares or the Mars expedition crew end up being like on I don't know, like MTV Big Brother or something. There's just like one of those reality shows like the Kardashians. There's basically like cameras following them around, and the Mars expedition becomes like one of the most popular television shows on the planet Earth. So that's it. If you've read this, let me know what you think about it. It tends more to the good side for me than the negative side. So it's kind of like a thumbs, maybe like it's not a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but it's kind of like a thumbs, like maybe just a smidge over. So if I was rating this would probably be like a 3.5 out of 5, right? If I was doing a star rating. And I guess my overall determination of the series will be based upon how the rest of it unfolds, because there is a lot of hanging chads at the end of this one. All right, guys, thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.